Hugh Hewitt here, coming up on today's show. I am not there. I am on the battlegroundtour.com, and if it's whatever day it is, I'm in a different city. Bob France of Cleveland, professional extraordinaire, and the guy who's going to join me to close the tour out is in right now, so stay tuned for the first hour of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the following program may contain pre-recorded material.
Morning glory, America. If it's Friday, this must be Columbus. I actually have no idea where I am. I'm out on the Radio Talker Battleground Tour. We're out there looking for enthusiasm among the voters, talking to people so that we are not ill-informed pundits who live in the blue bubble. And that helps us every day in every way. And Ed Morrissey is helping us out today by guest hosting for me. Thank you, Edward, and take it away, my friend.
Thank you very much, Hugh Hewitt. This is Ed Morrissey, managing editor of HotAir.com, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios deep in the heart of Texas. Thanks for being with us today. Got a lot of things to talk about. Joe Biden on the campaign trail. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Just to do a recap of a couple of key stories. First off, sudden movement in the generic ballot. If you look at Real Clear Politics, suddenly Republicans are skyrocketing, Democrats are declining. We are shocked to find that pollsters reaching the end of this cycle are starting to try to reflect reality in their final iterations of the generic ballot. Right now, you've got Republicans at the highest level they've been all year, 48.1% on the Real Clear Politics aggregate for the generic congressional ballot. Democrats are now dipping downward. They're at 44.8. That is a 3.3 lead for Republicans. This is on a metric where Democrats really have to be around a D+4 or a D+5 just to break even. There's all sorts of structural reasons for that. It has to do with polling. It has to do with the fact that these are congressional districts rather than states. Nevertheless, a Republican lead in any way, shape, or form is bad news for Democrats, and the way that this keeps expanding is even worse news. Monmouth came out yesterday with their latest poll. Republicans up 6, 50-44, and even the YouGov poll, which is a very Democrat-friendly poll, came out, I believe it was either yesterday or the day before, Republicans +1. The only Democrat lead on any of these is from Politico/Morning Consult, which was a registered voter polling report. And you may ask yourself, why is Morning Consult still reporting registered voter results, not likely voter results? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I have a pretty good sneaking suspicion, though, that the likely voter modeling that they would use would show Republicans with a fairly significant lead. And so, registered voters it is. They are still in their RV. They are still tooling around the country in their RV rather than in their LV. So these are the things. This is the environment that we're going into here in the final couple of weeks. Hugh Hewitt's out in the Battleground Talkers tour, which is a great way to absorb what's going on out in the country. But you can see this. You can see this in the economy. You can see this in turnout. You can see this in how people are responding to the candidates. And almost all of that news is good news for Republicans. So much so, I would add, that Joe Biden actually went out in the campaign trail yesterday to fight for an embattled Democrat who normally would not even be a close race. He's in Pennsylvania, of all places, where Josh Shapiro has got a 7-point lead in the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania over Republican Doug Mastriano. But John Fetterman is descending very quickly into a virtual tie or worse against Dr. Oz. And Joe Biden showed up in Pennsylvania to campaign for John Fetterman in a campaign decision that I am still scratching my head over. Literally scratching my head over this one. Why John Fetterman would want Joe Biden to show up when Joe Biden is as deeply unpopular in Pennsylvania as he is practically everywhere else.
He's at 38 in Pennsylvania, right?
It depends on which poll you're talking about, right? He's 38 in some polls. I think in civics he was 37% or 36%. I think the best of the polls showed him down 8 points, job approval rating, I should say, down 8 points in Pennsylvania. And that was, I forget which poll that was, but I mean, that was the best of them. He is not a popular figure. So he shows up to campaign for John Fetterman, who apparently never even opens his own mouth. And you'll notice, Dwayne, where was Josh Shapiro yesterday?
He was not there.
He was as far away from Joe Biden as possible. I'm not sure where he was in the state, but wherever Joe Biden was, I think Josh Shapiro was on the other end of the state. He didn't show up for this rally, which was supposed to be about the bridge collapse.
It was supposed to be an infrastructure thing.
It was an infrastructure thing, right? So Joe Biden shows up. John Fetterman isn't taking questions. We should just go to that one, that particular cut first, because I think this is one of the most telling developments, I guess you could call it, from yesterday's appearance in Pennsylvania. Giselle Fetterman actually had to intercede on behalf of her husband when reporters took the liberty of asking him a question at his own campaign event. Let's go to cut number 10.
Mr. Fetterman, are you satisfied with the progress of the bridge?
We're here to celebrate. We're not here to answer questions.
We're here to celebrate. We're not here to do interviews, I think is what she said.
Says John Fetterwoman.
John Fetterwoman.
No.
The de facto candidate. Giselle Fetterman is the de facto candidate. Rolling Stone declared her the de facto candidate last weekend, and so did Joe Biden.
Yes.
Let's go to cut number 8.
And John, thank you very much for running. I really do appreciate it. And Giselle, you're gonna be a great lady in the Senate.
What?
Wait, play that back. Who's going to be a great what in the Senate? Play it again.
John, thank you very much for running. I really do appreciate it. And Giselle, you're gonna be a great lady in the Senate.
Doing what?
A great lady in the Senate. She's not running for office. She's not in the Senate.
Is she going to have an office? Is she going to have floor privileges?
Well, I think
is she on a committee?
I think the implication here is that John Fetterman is running. Thank you for running, so that Giselle Fetterman can actually perform the duties.
It's like thank you for running past tense. Like thanks for handing the baton off to the real candidate. We're going to try and it's like they're trying to do a Torricelli in real time on the fly, as though
this isn't even a Torricelli. This is an Edith Wilson. This is not a Torricelli. They're not actually changing the candidate. This is an Edith Wilson.
Yes,
they're plugging the wife in. As and this has happened before, but usually you at least go through the motions of electing the wife, right? Where you've had somebody who's been term limited or who's been bounced out of office for corruption, and they run the wife, even though it's very clear it's the former,
like Mary Bono
governor.
After Sonny Bono died. That kind of thing.
Well, no, but I mean Mary Bono was her own woman, though. I mean Sonny Bono had passed away.
Yeah,
I'm talking about in Texas. I can't remember the name of the governor, but the governor got thrown out of office for corruption, so they ran Ferguson. I think it's Ma Ferguson ends up being governor, and she's taking orders from her husband the whole time, and everybody knew it. This is in like the mid 1930s, right? This is the same time as Bonnie and Clyde, is when they took down Bonnie and Clyde, because she was involved in that reluctantly. So I mean that's what this is, and it's not even going through the motions of democracy here. They're running this guy as a stalking horse.
But when is the last time that a professed candidate for office did not speak at his own rally?
And I mean this is weird, right? The whole thing is weird. If you're going to do something like this, it should be so that you could show that John Fetterman is actually recovering. I mean, there was this note from his donor doctor, right? The donor doctor's note said, "Oh no, he's recovering. He's doing very well. He's fully capable of doing the job." Literally the next day, he shows up at a rally for his own campaign and doesn't say a word. Won't interact with anybody. Won't interact with the reporters, let alone the voters that are showing up there, and his wife is pushing them off. I mean, that is a very strange setup. Now, I mean, the whole thing is a strange setup. We're going to be going over, there's more to go over in this hour. We're going to go over much more from this later in the show. But the whole thing here is very strange. First off, it's strange that Joe Biden shows up to campaign for Fetterman in the first place, because Joe Biden is doing terribly in terms of job approval, and everybody else in the campaign, in the Democratic Party, almost everybody else is running away from Joe Biden for that reason. And John Fetterman is not in a position of strength. It's not like John Fetterman's up by double digits and he wants to help lift up Joe Biden, because that would make a little bit of sense if Shapiro did it, for instance.
The race is a dead heat right now.
Right.
It's a straight up.
I think that their polling is showing that he's losing, and that's the reason why they brought Joe Biden in.
I think so too. I think it's undersampling, but the polls are saying it's a straight up tie. You know that Oz is probably up by 3 or 4.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Welcome back. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com filling in for Hugh. Disco lives forever whenever I guest host for Hugh. That's an awesome piece of music. I love that.
It's a little Giselle music.
It's a little Giselle music. That's right. It's going to be Ladies' Night apparently in Pennsylvania.
She is a de facto nominee, and she's apparently going to be a great lady in the Senate.
It was Ladies' Night yesterday in Pennsylvania, right? At Joe Biden's Fetterman rally, at which Fetterman never even spoke at his own rally. Oh, my goodness. But you know what? We've got to speak about something else for the moment. While Hugh's in Columbus, Ohio today, preparing for the big Battleground Talkers Tour, he asked me to remind you about the critical importance of your support for Alliance Defending Freedom. Have you donated yet? It's easy. Just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the ADF banner to support America's largest Christian conservative legal defense organization. Mike Ferris joined ADF back in 2017, and he says the vicious attacks on their clients' religious freedom these days are more intense than ever.
The fierceness of the attacks, along with just the sheer numbers of them, the number of calls that we're getting from parents who are at wit's end about what's going on with their kids in the public schools, where they're being taught that their kids are inherently racist because of their skin color, and they're being taught that their Christianity makes them an oppressor. We're aiming to fight and win, and we need people to stand with us.
If it can happen to those parents, it can happen to you. So the way you can stand with ADF is to make your generous gift of $100 or more to help Alliance Defending Freedom protect your children's God-given rights against unconstitutional government overreach, which is in the headlines every day. And right now, thanks to that generous friend of ADF, your first gift in any amount will be doubled. Just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Alliance Defending Freedom banner or phone in your donation at 855-374-4123. That's 855-374-4123. Believe me, you'll be glad you did. ADF does a lot of great work, and I've interviewed a number of ADF officials and attorneys, all very, very well versed in what they do. They're very successful in what they do. Your money is going to have the maximum effect when you donate to ADF. So yes, great cause. Getting back to Pennsylvania, getting back to another great cause, which is apparently Ladies' Night in the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. I gotta say, and we're going to get to more of Joe Biden, but just to focus for the moment on John Fetterman still. I don't think this guy shows up for the debate. The debate's on Tuesday night. I mean, we're talking about
There's no way.
3 days from now or 4 days from now, right?
I think is the 28th when he's going to do it.
I think it's the 28th, right?
So that's what, Thursday?
Is it? I think you're right. I think it might be Thursday. It's Thursday rather than
Thursday
Tuesday.
Night. The chance of him debating is 0%. The chance of him saying, I've tested positive for COVID, and even though I'm non-symptomatic and doing well, I'm going to self-isolate for the next 10 days. The chance of him releasing that by way of Giselle Fetterman on Wednesday night, the night before the debate, is about 100%.
I don't see any way they put this guy in front of a camera. I mean, if he was able to debate, he would have been able to converse with the reporters yesterday. It's not like he's never shown up on the campaign trail either. I mean, he has shown up on the campaign trail. It's always very controlled, though. He's giving speeches. He's not really interacting with people. And even when he's giving speeches, he has a tendency to get his words confused and get his point confused and sometimes gets lost. He's not the only person, by the way. We're going to get to that maybe after the break. He's not the only person who has those issues on the campaign trail. Joe Biden demonstrated some of that yesterday himself. But I mean, there is no way if you can't answer questions from reporters at a gaggle at a rally that's promoting your own campaign, there's no way you get into a back and forth debate against your political opponent. I mean, reporters for Democrats tend to be on the friendly side anyway. Oz is not going to be on the friendly side. They're not going to put this guy up against him. There's just no way, right, Dwayne?
Not a chance.
No.
Not a chance.
No, I don't see this at all. I think that this whole thing has been yesterday an example of just how far off the public polling.
It's just unraveling.
And I think it shows you how far off the public polling is from the internal polling. I suspect that they never would have done this yesterday if they weren't desperate to get some sort of a reset. We'll be back with more on this. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh today. Lady Marmalade, there you go. Now there's that's some good early 1970s. That's not disco, man. That's R&B. That's awesome.
Yeah,
stuff
that's straight up R&B. It's also more Giselle music.
I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole, Dwayne. I'm going to let you hang out on that limb and see if anybody saws it off. All right. So, but speaking of what happened yesterday, I don't think we can emphasize this too much because I think this was sort of a watershed moment in the midterm campaign, and I am still a bit bemused by why Fetterman and Biden were put in the same place at the same time in Pennsylvania yesterday. It's either the Fetterman campaign's desperate or Joe Biden's desperate to become relevant. And I almost kind of suspect it's the latter. This might have been driven by the White House. I don't know why Fetterman would have played along other than the fact that they are also desperate. But I want to go to cut number 2 here because I think this is the reason why Joe Biden ends up in Pennsylvania yesterday is because everybody's been noticing that all the rest of the Democrats across the country are keeping him at arm's length. Let's go to cut number 2.
John Fetterman is going to appear with you today in Pennsylvania. John Fetterman's going to appear with you today in Pennsylvania, but there haven't been that many candidates campaigning with you. Why are more?
That's not true. There's been 15. Count, kid, count.
Okay, and are there going to be even more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Count, kid, count. There's been 15 of them. 15 times he's campaigned with Democratic candidates. Dwayne, how many Democratic candidates right now are in the field in these midterms?
Dozens.
And
dozens.
You've got what? You've got 435 House races.
You've got governors. You've got Senate candidates all over the country.
You have 35. I think it's 35 because we have a couple of special elections.
Dozens.
You got hundreds. If you count the House races, you got hundreds.
Donald Trump campaigned for 15 in a week.
Sometimes in a weekend, he would campaign for 15. He's done 15. 15. Learn to count, kid.
But if Joe Biden, this guy is saying learn to count as though he's
well, I want to get to that. I want to get to the learn to count thing for Joe Biden because, well, let's just go ahead and go right to it. Cut number 7.
No,
Joe Biden.
Cut number 3.
Well, okay, we can start with cut number 3. This is an old cut, but let's go to cut number 3 first.
Look, John's last-minute economic plan does nothing to tackle the number one job facing the middle class. And it happens to be, as Barack says, a 3-letter word, jobs. J-O-B-S, jobs.
Right, okay, so
you want to tell me to learn to count?
2008. That was from 2008, right? I want to go to the 2022 version of Learn to Count. Let's go to cut number 7 because this was this is what, within an hour or two after that Learn to Count kid comment. Cut number 7.
It's infrastructure decade, a headline on my watch. With the help of your members of Congress here today, I signed into law a once-in-a-generation investment in roads, highways, bridges, railroads, ports, airports, and so much more. Over $1.2 billion. It's called the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Well, it was $1.2 billion.
Yes.
It was 1.2 billion.
Learn to count,
kid. 1.2 trillion. 1.2 trillion. Now I need to learn to count. 1.2 trillion. And why Joe Biden? This is literally one of 3 signature accomplishments that he got done in this session. He only has 3 bills that he can brag about. And one of them is the American Rescue Plan, which touched off this hyperinflationary wave that is absolutely wiping Democrats out from coast to coast in this midterm.
And he couldn't talk about it straight off the prompter.
Off the prompter. This is a prepared speech. $1.2 billion bill. No, $1.2 trillion bill for infrastructure, which was a bipartisan effort because Republicans like to spend money just as much as Democrats do. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We gave them the opportunity to spend money, and everybody thundered to the trough. That was not. I mean, this was the low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, I'm not even sure you could count this as that much of an accomplishment. Both sides wanted to get this done. You can argue that, okay, he got it done. Donald Trump wasn't able to get it done. But that had a lot to do with Democrats not wanting to cooperate with that, whereas Republicans wanted to cooperate on infrastructure at least. But the other two bills, American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, the ridiculously named Inflation Reduction Act, those are bills that he doesn't want to talk too much about because they're both flopping badly at the moment. All right. Now, when we get, again, sticking with Fetterman just a little bit longer here, because I don't want to get too far off of this. I want to make sure that we get this in. John Fetterman has another problem here. I mean, it's not just his physical status; it's also his position on the issues, and especially when it comes to crime. Now, the RJC actually has a pretty good ad coming up here, but before we get to the ad, I want to get to cut number 11, which is Fetterman himself talking about how he sees mercy towards people who have been convicted of murder.
First degree. Life without parole.
He has tried to distinguish between the two, but he's voted to parole people who've been convicted of first degree murder, too. So, John Fetterman, cut number 11.
People in the public think that you're talking about all a bunch of Hannibal Lecters in prison, and they're not. They're like your grandfather. They're like your grandmother. I tell people, watch The Shawshank Redemption if you haven't already, and think about Morgan Freeman sitting in front of you after doing 40 years. Would you say, no, you should die in prison? Most people would say, of course not. That's what a lot of this...
You know, there's a guy there's a guy in Pennsylvania that was convicted of first degree.
Right.
Served 8 years of a life sentence and got paroled, got let out early. And he is now on the lam in Pennsylvania. They are actively looking for him because he is suspected in a Netter homicide.
Right. I mean, this is just this
He's
argument
not grandpa,
alone.
by the way.
No, and I believe that this was from before his stroke. This is John Fetterman speaking about this issue before his stroke. I think this is an older clip from a previous interview. I mean the vapidity of this argument. Well, if you look at the Shawshank Redemption, it means that we should parole people who've been convicted of murder. I mean, the Shawshank Redemption was a great movie. It was actually an even better novella from Stephen King, but it's fiction.
Yes.
It's fiction. In real life, dangerous people who commit first-degree murder should stay behind bars for the rest of their lives. And that is in order to prevent other people from dying, as Dwayne just got done talking about, because when people commit that level of criminality, generally speaking, there's not a whole lot left that's holding them back from committing more of that criminality. So you're going to release them after a first-degree murder conviction to do what? To become a banker? I mean, we can go to the other main character of the Shawshank Redemption. No, they're not going to go back to being a banker. They're not going to go back to being grandpa. These are people who are going to have extremely limited life choices, who made bad choices when they had better choices available to them previous to their conviction. And just the sense of justice for the families of those people who've been victimized by first-degree murderers, it should be enough to laugh off this idea that the Shawshank Redemption should be the controlling philosophy for law enforcement, for penology, for making for the whole idea of parole is just simply ridiculous. It's silly. It's childish. It's a very childish approach to this. Now, that's not to say that John Fetterman doesn't have a get tough on the streets sort of attitude. We can go to the RJC ad that I was talking about just a moment.
That, yes.
He does have a history of that. Let's go to cut number 13.
I may have broken the law.
That's what John Fetterman said after he chased down an unarmed, innocent black man and held him at gunpoint. Now this guy wants to be in the Senate? Are you serious? My message to black voters, do your homework about John Fetterman.
I may have broken the law.
He didn't even apologize, and now he wants our vote? Not a chance.
RGC Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this ad.
That's going to come up a time or two between now and 2 weeks from now.
You know what's interesting is I think we would have gotten to the point in the polling even without Fetterman's stroke based on this type of stuff, because I think Fetterman would have continued to say stuff like this throughout the campaign. I don't think he has that much of a filter on him, And I think that Oz would have gotten under his skin enough to provoke a lot of that. Because I don't think Fetterman's ever really been seriously challenged politically in his career. And I think that the scrutiny that this campaign would have put on him would have forced him to say more of these dumb things, more of these, uber progressive declarations. And it would have put him in an increasingly worse position as the campaign wore on, especially as Mehmet Oz began to be better and better at campaigning, too, which is another underreported aspect of the campaign in Pennsylvania. Selena Zito's done a great job, and she's here regularly on the Hugh Hewitt show talking about that. He has gotten much better as a candidate, and it's showing. He's doing the retail politicking, the ground level retail politicking that's necessary to build up that type of grassroots support. And in Pennsylvania especially, I think it's even more so. I mean, we wouldn't talk about fracking. We haven't even gotten to fracking. And Fetterman just recently tried to reverse himself, claiming that he supports fracking when he's got a whole long history of declaring himself completely opposed to fracking, completely opposed to more oil and natural gas
extraction. CNN of all places undressed him on that. CNN criticized him and said, "Oh, come on, man, that's not even remotely close to accurate."
No. I mean, it's. I mean, these types of things would have been happening anyway. I think that the polls would have moved in Oz's favor anyway. But the fact that this guy is just clearly not capable of campaigning, let alone serving in the Senate, I think it's accelerating that. And I think when he misses this debate this coming up week, the deal will be closed. We'll be back with more. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned.
Don't go anywhere. Ed will be right back. I do want to remind you, I'm going back from Detroit. Okay, I left Detroit. We had a great event last night, but I'm on my way to Maine. And what do I know about Detroit? I look around at an economy that was once thriving and is now nothing, and all those people had all that GM stock that eventually went to zero. You know what never goes to zero? Gold. That's why you ought to go to Birch Gold this morning. Birch Gold via HughGold.com, HughGold.com, or text my name, Hugh, to 989898. Really, every time I go to Detroit, I think, you know what? GM went to zero, and some people rode that stock right down to nothing. That's why you've got to have gold in your portfolio. It's the one thing you can count on will never, ever lose its value and may increase its value dramatically. That's Birch Gold. Buy your gold from Birch Gold. That's where I do. Go to HughGold.com or text HUGH to 989898. Open up an IRA or a SEP IRA. Have them become the third-party administrator of your SEP IRA or IRA Gold IRA, physical gold. Let me also remind you about ReliefFactor.com. Took it with me everywhere I went. Had to have it. Not going to miss it for a day. Took it this morning before I left Detroit. Got to get back and get some news sent back down to Studio Beltway, where I'll be back next week after we go out on our barnstorming tour. But ReliefFactor.com is an absolute necessity when you're traveling as far and as fast as I do in election season. You have got to have it in your back pocket like I have it in my Studio South, my Studio West, my Studio North. Wherever I go, there's Relief Factor because I take it every single morning, and I did this morning even though I'm not with you. And so I encourage all of you, go get your ReliefFactor.com today. Don't forget it because you didn't put it in your car yet. And if you've been thinking about ordering it, maybe Ed will push you over the top. Maybe you're about to do something this weekend that you know is going to leave you a little bit sore. That's what you need Relief Factor for. The minor aches and pains of life. Take it every day, feel great, and come back for more of Ed Morrissey right after this.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios deep in the heart of Texas with more hot stuff. This is a brand new result from Emerson College polling. This just dropped just a few minutes ago, I believe, that shows that Joe Biden's supposedly improving job approval rate, which was all the way up to 45-49 last month, is now at 39-53 in the closing days here of the midterm election. The generic ballot poll from Emerson, which was tied at 45 a month ago, is now 46-41 GOP, 41% being the Democrats' lowest rating in this series all year long. Republicans aren't quite up to their highest level, 46%. They were at 50% back in February, but this is as high as it's been since June. And so now you've got a 5-point gap in the Emerson, in the most recent Emerson poll. Monmouth had it at 6 points. This is going south very quickly for Democrats, and it's that's on a national basis, and it's true in spot races as well. For instance, CBS News was in Arizona and had a pretty interesting series of insights into both the Senate and the gubernatorial races in Arizona. Let's go to cut number 19 first in Arizona.
Joe Biden's the worst president ever, man. Why? First of all, look at gas, the economy, the border. We got fentanyl. He doesn't care about it. He doesn't care about Americans.
Trump could run again. All you have to do is say, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago when I was in office? And the answer would be a resounding no.
Hello, Phoenix. Former President Trump endorsed Republican Blake Masters to unseat Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, a Democrat.
Mark Kelly does nothing for the state.
Mark Kelly does nothing for this state, and Mark Kelly obviously very closely tied to Joe Biden. And Biden, I mean, the Emerson College poll is a national poll, but it's looking pretty bad in Arizona as well. And again, it's because Joe Biden is on the wrong side of the issues that matter to voters in Arizona. Let's go to cut number 18.
Danielle Taylor didn't hold back on her top issues.
Securing our borders first and foremost. Nothing's more important to me than securing our borders. And I am a small business owner. And so keeping in mind that the inflation is a real problem.
For the mom, making this election personal.
How personal do you want me to be?
It's up to you.
I would like to see this country turn around for the better. And voting is the only way to make that happen.
Well, that's definitely true. It's the only way to make this happen. We've been emphasizing that message here, really across the whole Salem, firmament here, is that you can't just sit back and look at the polls and hope things are going to work out. You actually got to go out and vote to make it happen. I also want to get to cut number 17. Ed O'Keefe still in Arizona, looking at the Arizona races there.
Russell Kitchener, a registered independent, here with his wife Lorraine, saw that in President Biden's decision to forgive some student loans.
I got student loans, my wife got student loans, millions of people got student loans, and we paid them back. That's strictly a case of catering to a population that already leans toward his party. So, I see through that, and I hope he pays for it politically. I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I think that again, Joe Biden is on the wrong side of all of these issues, and it's not just in Arizona, but I think it's very interesting in Arizona because I think Democrats went into maybe even the month of September thinking that they were going to do pretty well in Arizona, that Mark Kelly was going to win re-election there, and that Katie Hobbs would win by marginalizing Kari Lake. And that is, that's really been turned on its head. The gubernatorial race has been turned entirely on its head. Katie Hobbs is just collapsing in Arizona, mostly from her own incompetence and from her own lack of courage. She won't face Kari Lake in a debate. And I think voters react very negatively to cowardice from a candidate. Debates are an expectation. They're an expectation. People are expected to debate. Fetterman is going to come up with an excuse, but Katie Hobbs just said, I'm flat out not going to do it. I'm not going to get on the same stage with her. And it's ridiculous to think that you're not going to debate against your main opponent in any American election. It's just simply not done. And so it just underscores the extreme nature of the Democrats that are involved in this cycle, especially in Arizona. And I think that Joe Biden, again, is proving to be an albatross. That, by the way, that Emerson College poll, Emerson College is actually a pretty decent poll, so I don't want to necessarily accuse them of any particular chicanery, but I don't see how you go from a 45-45 to a 46-41 in a month here in the generic ballot, and I don't see how you go from a 45-49 on Joe Biden's job approval rating to a 39-53. I mean, there might be cases where you have some sort of instigating incident that would create that type of rapid divergence. My guess here is that polling is finally catching up to the environment that we're operating in. The pollsters are finally starting to figure this out, and that's the reason why you're seeing these wide swings at the end of the cycle, which, by the way, is not at all unusual. We see this an awful lot in our business, where the pollsters suddenly find momentum where it had always existed prior to that. We're going to have much more in the next hour, so stay tuned. I'm Ed Morrissey, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Go to myphdweightloss.com to learn more.
Portions of the following program may contain pre-recorded material.
Morning glory, America. If it's Friday, this must be Columbus. I actually have no idea where I am. I'm out on the Radio Talker Battleground Tour. We're out there looking for enthusiasm among the voters, talking to people so that we are not ill-informed pundits who live in the blue bubble. And that helps us every day in every way. And Ed Morrissey is helping us out today by guest hosting for me. Thank you, Edward, and take it away, my friend.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios here deep in the heart of Texas. We're going to step away from the campaign trail for just a moment to talk about movies and maybe a little bit about politics with my friend Christian Toto of HollywoodandToto.com, at HollywoodandToto on Twitter. And Christian, always great to talk to you in the morning here.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Christian, before we get into the hot movies that are coming up this weekend, because that's really what everybody wants to hear about, I do want to ask you, though, about the turnaround in fortunes at Netflix. Now, Netflix had gone sort of the way of Hollywood in general, pandering to a woke crowd, starting to lean against some of its content providers who were getting crosswise with progressive audiences. And then in the middle of all this, and I think it was really Dave Chappelle's courage in this, Netflix really turned around and said, you know what, we're not going to pander here, and if you don't like it, you don't have to work for us, and if you don't like it, you don't have to subscribe to us. And a very odd thing happened at Netflix. Now, analysts aren't necessarily linking these two things, but I would call this a really fascinating coincidence that just at the moment that Netflix decided to dump woke, it stopped going broke.
Yeah, the numbers are interesting. They've been losing subscribers in recent months, and their stock prices have been hammered as a result. But the newest numbers are they've gained subscribers. Now, a lot of those gains are overseas, not in America. But there was a very modest increase here. But also, I think they got to stop the bleeding. And I think it's important that from their brand's point of view, that they kind of take this approach, because a lot of companies are either not doing it or even going in the other direction. So I think that Netflix did the right thing by saying, hey, we're going to stand up for our artists, for free speech, for creativity. And like they told their employees in so many words, pound sand if you don't like it. I mean, there was a lot of hullabaloo when Dave Chappelle had that special late last year. So it's an interesting turn of events, but I have to say, reading comments on social media, people are reacting to my website stories, there's still a lot of animosity for the past positioning of Netflix. So I think they've got some more work to do, but I think they're in the right direction.
Well, I think they're in the right direction. And look, I mean, reputational changes are slow. They're always slow. Yeah. And I think that, when you burn people, it takes a long time for them to extend any sort of trust or benefit of the doubt. And I get that. But I mean, I think if you look, and you made this point to me actually offline, if you look at what they're actually producing and putting on air, or on stream, I guess. We say on air. We mean on stream, of course. I mean, I think that there's a lot there to laud in terms of corporate courage.
And I also don't think that people on the right want a monolith as far as the content that comes into their homes. It's not like, well, they had this one new show and it had a left-of-center comedian. How dare they? Well, no, it's a variety of voices on there, and I think that's important as well.
Well, I think it's because we're used to having to live in a heterodox society, whereas maybe the left isn't quite so used to it, right? I mean, I think that's real. I'm laughing here, but I can't. I mean, I'm a lifelong conservative, and I can't remember a time when entertainment choices weren't, from center left to all the way left, with very, very few exceptions. We celebrate the Dennis Millers and the Norm Macdonalds to some extent and that sort of thing, but I mean, when I was growing up, there was an awful lot of, Robin Williams, God bless him, and Whoopi Goldberg, and every other comedian up there would be, bashing on Republicans, bashing on conservative values, and you just learn to live with that. I don't think that the left has learned to live with heterodoxy very well.
Yeah, I mean, remember when Jon Stewart appeared on Stephen Colbert's show and said something akin to, well, maybe that lab leak theory has some merit, and everyone freaked out because there was a different point of view on that show. They were shocked, and I don't blame them because you never get that. So that's why the reaction was so profound.
And the Trevor Noah thing recently, where he went after Joe Biden for his age and competency, and then the next day announced that he was actually leaving the Daily Show. I don't think that was a coincidence either. But I don't think if he was planning on, he left on his own volition, but I don't think he was planning to stick around. He would have been telling those jokes in his final few weeks. So, but. Christian, we do want to get to a couple of the movies this week. Black Adam is one of them, and that is, of course, the newest superhero model movie with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who's just incredibly likable at the box office. This is an incredibly likable sort of celebrity. Does Black Adam live up to the billing?
It doesn't. It's not a bad movie. I enjoyed myself. It's breezy. It's light. It doesn't take itself seriously. But, I think he's been playing superheroic figures for so long. It's like, well, let's put him in a superhero movie. He looks the part. He acts the part. Let's kind of complete the circle. But this character is complicated. He's kind of an anti-hero. You don't know whether he's good or bad. I don't think even he knows. I think that is interesting, but I don't think it's really fully developed in the movie. Also, as I'm watching Black Adam, I'm thinking, oh, I've seen that before. I've seen this before. I've seen that element before. It feels very recycled, and I think that's part of the problem here, too. So it's fine. It's it'll kind of scratch the itch if you're a superhero fan, but I don't think it's nearly as good as we hoped for. And also, DC comic movies have been very all over the map. Some are pretty good, some are lousy, and I think this continues that sort of inconsistent pattern.
Isn't it based on the Suicide Squad platform too? Viola Davis is in it, and I'm thinking that's a really odd platform to base tentpole movies on, because the Suicide Squad movies were just terrible. They're terrible movies.
Yeah, listen, I think that DC comic movies are desperately trying to replicate the MCU model, where it's a shared universe and the characters appear here and there, and there's consistency in the storytelling. They don't do it nearly as well as the MCU did a few years ago. So they're trying. You can see the flop sweat, but it's there.
All right, Ticket to Paradise. You got George Clooney, Julia Roberts, two of the most likable box office draws probably in history, together again. I'm not even sure they were together before, but at least together in this instance. How does that play?
It's interesting. I'm so used to rom-coms that are insulting, that are chock full of gimmicks, where the writing just makes your teeth hurt. And this is none of that. It's actually charming. It's light. It's enjoyable, and there's a little bit of sadness built into it. It's about they play a married couple. They've been long since divorced. They fight like you wouldn't believe, but they have to come together briefly because their daughter is getting married, and they want to stop it because she's too young. This is too impulsive. She's not ready. They don't want her to make their mistake. And of course, when they get together and they're trying to help the daughter, some of the old feelings are rekindled. This is pretty good movie making. Some of the dialogue is smart. I really like the chemistry between Clooney and Roberts, and it's an older romance. It's not sort of wacky and silly. It's actually kind of thoughtful, and I like that element about it as well. It's not rushing into this joke and this gag. So I think it kind of lets itself breathe. You've got real movie stars here with definitely charisma, and it's not great. It's not When Harry Met Sally, but it's enjoyable, and there's great scenery here as well. It's set in Bali, but it's not really shot in Bali, but it looks beautiful wherever they shot it. And I think if you miss old school rom-coms and don't want to be insulted, it's not a bad choice.
Well, I mean, again, I think it's a question of what's out there competing with it at the time, too, in terms of the rom-com space. But, I mean, am I correct that this is the first time the two of them have been paired together in leading roles? I know that they appeared in the same movie together in Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, but I'm racking my brain and I can't think of a movie that they were partnered off like this, and I'm not sure why that wouldn't have been something that wasn't tried to do 15, 20 years ago. I mean, it would almost make sense. These are two real big box office draws.
Yeah, Making Up for Lost Time. I believe they may have appeared together in the Ocean's films. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yes, they did. Back. It was,
That's true.
An ensemble. So, but yeah, there's something about movie stars. No, I think the big question though is, do people care anymore? I mean, are they going to come out to see movie stars? A few weeks ago, we had Amsterdam, which had every movie star on the planet, and it flopped in spectacular fashion. So, I think the public is in a different place when it comes to the movie stars. We think they're beautiful. We might follow them on Instagram sometimes, but I don't think it necessarily puts the fannies in the seats, but we'll see this weekend.
Well, I think you're looking at two different types of audiences here. Ticket to Paradise, I think, is an audience that has to build itself. Rom-com audiences are out there, but I think it has to make a sale. Black Adam is in a space where people are already part of that whole comic book universe sort of thing. So I think they've got a more built-in audience there. We'll see how each of those perform, but we will have to see how well that holds up by what the deal that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets for Black Adam 2 whenever that comes.
That's right.
Christian Toto from Hollywood and Toto, thanks for staying with us today. We'll be right back. I'm Ed Morrissey from hotair.com. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show, where we never freak out, but disco lives forever. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios here deep in the heart of Texas. And Hugh is out on the road, while Hugh is in Columbus, Ohio today, preparing for tonight's big Battleground Talkers Tour. He asked me to remind you about the critical importance of your support for Alliance Defending Freedom. Have you donated yet? It's easy. Just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the ADF banner to support America's largest Christian conservative legal defense organization. Mike Ferris joined ADF back in 2017, and he says the vicious attacks on their clients' religious freedom these days are more intense than ever.
The fierceness of the attacks, along with just the sheer numbers of them, the number of calls that we're getting from parents who are at wit's end about what's going on with their kids in the public schools, where they're being taught that their kids are inherently racist because of their skin color, and they're being taught that their Christianity makes them an oppressor. We're aiming to fight and win, and we need people to stand with us.
If it can happen to those parents, it can happen to you. So the way you stand with ADF is to make your generous gift of $100 or more to help Alliance Defending Freedom protect your children's God-given rights against unconstitutional government overreach, which is in the headlines every day. And right now, thanks to that generous friend of ADF, your first gift in any amount will be doubled. Just go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Alliance Defending Freedom banner or phone in your donation at 855-374-4123. That's 855-374-4123. Believe me, you'll be glad you did. And we're going to be talking with John Birsch from the Alliance Defending Freedom here at the end of the hour, too. So we'll get a chance to talk to him a little bit more about the fine work that ADF is doing. But speaking of fine work, Dwayne, you've been working hard on trimming down and getting healthy. How's that been going?
I have been. Ever since about the middle of August, I started the program over at myphdweightloss.com and had my weigh in with Rachel, the nutritionist that was assigned to me. Talked to her every Wednesday, and I got down to 199.5. Wow. I broke the 200-pound barrier.
That's awesome.
I have not been below 200 pounds in a long time, and so that's 41 pounds. I've lost a pound since then. I'm at 198 something. I don't know where I'm at, somewhere in the 198 range, but it's a really cool program. You know, it's easy to follow. It's as long as you're committed to doing it and you just decide not to cheat. It's easy enough to, I mean, which is always the biggest problem, right?
I mean, it sounds easy, but it ain't easy. I mean, believe me, it ain't easy.
And I understand that, but as long as you decide, you know, it's time. You know, you put on that COVID-19 or 2 or 3 COVID-19s that a lot of people did after the lockdown.
Yep.
They never did lose that weight they gained by being static and stuck at home for so long. It's easy enough to do. All you've got to do is commit to do it. And all you have to do is call 864-644-1900 or go to myphdweightloss.com and they will craft a program for you too. I mean, you know my schedule. My schedule is a bonkers schedule. And they created a meal plan that, you know, I eat while I'm at the studio here in the middle of the night, and then I eat 3 times during the rest of the normal day, and they can craft a meal plan that will fit your schedule as well. So 864-644-1900. You can lose a bunch of weight between now and the end of the year and get in shape by the holidays if you go to myphdweightloss.com.
myphdweightloss.com. And let me tell you something. It's not easy losing that kind of weight and staying healthy, right? I mean, there are fad diets where you can knock a bunch of weight off in a big hurry. A lot of it's water weight, but a lot of it is also takes away muscle weight.
Absolutely.
And leaves you a lot less healthy. Dwayne, how are you feeling health-wise?
I feel great.
Right,
I feel great. I go out walking every night, and I actually, you know, shape-wise, I'm in as good a shape as I've been in a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, see, I think that's the key. And I mean, I'm somebody who's gone up and down, up and down, up and down during my adult life. And it wasn't until I went on the type 2 diabetic diet about a few years ago. And that was, you know, that's
by necessity. Yeah.
That's not nearly as pleasant as myphdweightloss.com will set something up for you, but it's effective. and so don't wait for the way I did it. Go to myphdweightloss.com. Do it the way Dwayne Patterson's doing it. I'm Ed Morrissey, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Go to myphdweightloss.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt today, live from the ReliefFactor.com studios here, deep in the heart of Texas. You know, I know we've got a lot of horse race stuff that we can be talking about. We've got a ton of different issues to discuss. However, I have to get to this really interesting Good Morning America report on one of the outcomes from Hurricane Ian. First off, I want to note that we're not hearing anything in the media these days about the cleanup efforts in Florida from Hurricane Ian, by which we can all assume that Ron DeSantis is doing a fantastic job in dealing with the hurricane, because the media was setting this up as the next Hurricane Katrina. They were going to use it to knock out Ron DeSantis if he made any missteps at all down there, and suddenly nobody's talking about this. It's not that there's not cleanup issues, which we're going to get to in just a second. It's just that apparently Ron DeSantis is on top of them so much that they can't use it to beat him up. And so they'd rather just not recognize the fact that he's doing a good job down there. Now, with that said, I want to give kudos to ABC News and Good Morning America for actually covering this particular story. And you're going to see why I am surprised that this story got national attention. Let's go, and it's a long cut. Let's go to cut number 32. Matt Gutman from Good Morning America and electric vehicles in the wake of Hurricane Ian.
Now, with an urgent alert in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian in Florida, some electric vehicles have been bursting into flames. Our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, has more on some of the hurricane-damaged vehicles. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Robin. So this is a typical lot where they'd store cars that have been totaled by flood damage. You can see how closely parked all those vehicles are. And this is a field where they have to store EVs so they don't burst into flames and burn anything else down. And right now in Florida, officials are sounding the alarm and they're asking the federal government for guidance.
In Hurricane Ian's aftermath, electric vehicles bursting into flames spontaneously after being damaged in floodwaters. Car batteries catching fire, prompting an urgent new warning from the state.
Is the theory that when salt water interacts with these EV batteries, they turn into something of a time bomb?
Well, we just can assume that that's contributing to it because all these are storm-damaged vehicles that were flooded.
It's a real concern among firefighters, those fires proving very difficult to put out.
So how much water would you put on a typical gas-powered car?
Sometimes we just take a tank of water on the engine, around 750 to 1,000 gallons.
How much on something
These,
like this?
we're doing 8,000 plus gallons of water, just constant flow, trying to cool them down and stop the battery.
So like 10 to 12 times the amount of water is required to put a car out like this?
Easily.
An EV?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And they can reignite. Tim Baker towed this Tesla to his lot after firefighters put it out.
I went back in my office, got a drink, sat down on the couch, and one of my employees yelled, "Hey, there's a fire."
Baker had to push the car out into the street.
Another eventful day.
And you can see the car still on skids, pumping smoke, sputtering into flames. They had to plunk it in the drainage ditch.
There are an increasing number of tow truck drivers and companies who are just refusing to tow these vehicles.
Yeah, pretty much so. I mean, they're very dangerous cars to tow. They have a potential to catch fire at pretty much any time.
And storing flooded EVs is increasingly a problem.
This field has been specifically designated for electric vehicles that have been flooded out by Hurricane Ian. Every single one of them has to be spaced 50 feet apart in case they spontaneously burst into flames. The traditional cars in this lot, parked on the other side, they can be parked close together.
Bobby Schneider, who trains first responders on handling EV fires, says the potential dangers remain.
That's part of our concern, is that when they come into areas that have no electricity and they restore power to the grid, what about the vehicles that are sitting in garages or parking garages that were plugged in, charging before the storm surge happened?
And now Florida State Fire Marshal calling on federal officials for action. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration responding in a letter acknowledging the problem, writing, "Lithium-ion vehicle battery fires have been observed both rapidly igniting and igniting several weeks after battery damage occurred." That state fire marshal now calling on EV companies to pitch in.
We need you to lean forward, partner with us, and understand how we can protect our first responders, how we can save people's homes from burning down.
So if folks watching have EVs that have been flooded, especially in salt water, you're going to want to make sure first that you unplug it from the electricity. You might also want to alert authorities so they can pull it 50 feet away from any structure. Guys, but it is important to note every expert we've been talking to is saying that EVs are not necessarily more dangerous than a traditional gas-powered vehicle. They just have to be handled differently, and first responders across the country are now being trained in those methods and in getting them safely to a recycling facility. Guys.
Got to keep that in mind. You're right about that. Thank you, Matt.
I have to say that they certainly sound a lot more dangerous than traditional internal combustion vehicles. I mean, if you have to put 10 times more water on an EV car to keep the battery from exploding in a fire, and if you are talking about damage of fires being able to spontaneously erupt weeks after whatever the damaging event is, while perhaps sitting in somebody's garage, I mean, I think that sounds a little bit more dangerous than traditional internal combustion vehicles.
Isn't that remarkable?
I mean, this is an amazing story. And I mean, again, kudos to ABC News for even covering this. I'm surprised that they did, frankly. But this is, I mean, it's astounding to me. This is the type of thing that really we should have been looking into prior to making the huge commitment to changing over our entire personal vehicle fleet from internal combustion to electric vehicles. And there's lots of reasons why that's a bad idea, but this is really a good reason why not to get an electric vehicle car. I mean, after watching this, I've always been a little curious and maybe even a little interested in getting an EV, and after watching this, it's like, maybe not. Maybe if I can store it 50 feet away from my house, I might be considering it. That's pretty bad. All right. Right now, we want to bring on Tarzana Joe from TarzanaJoe.com, at Tarzana Joe on Twitter. And Tarzana Joe, we're getting out of the normal order of things here, but Tarzana Joe's on with us today to give us the poem for the end of the week. Tarzana Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Just a minute, I'm going to run outside and see if anything's on fire.
Yeah, double check that, please. Yeah, make sure that you've disconnected the EV from the charger before you do that, because you never know.
You never know. But once you listen to this poem, you will know. Now we all are in agreement that inflation is a curse, but don't elect Republicans, because, friends, it could get worse. You're paying higher prices than you ever have before, but if they flip the Senate, it will cost you even more. People, those are slogans that the Democrats are yelling, but no one in America is buying what they're selling. Keep the left in power, they'll be selling bread by slices. For beds and for our breakfast, we'll be paying Weimar prices. My personal economy has taken quite a licking. We've given up on eggs because we had to eat the chicken. The folks I see out shopping all appear to be in shock. The lines outside the dollar store are winding round the block. I bought myself a hybrid because the cost of gas is dear. The dealer said with luck they might deliver it next year. Until then, on occasion, if I have to travel far, I say mine's in the shop and ask to take my neighbor's car. So I'm certain when I tell you, on the night of the election, the country will be turning in a positive direction. But if I am mistaken and they pull another fast one, when all the votes are counted twice, it ends up like the last one. I have a little backup plan. You all know what that means. I bought myself a siphon, and I'm hoarding pork and beans. That's inflation. By Tarzana Joe.
Inflation by Tarzana Joe. That's brilliant, Tarzana Joe. And by the way, I seem to recall you telling Hugh Hewitt that inflation has not yet hit the poetry market, at least not at TarzanaJoe.com.
Well, ink is a steady commodity, and my time is more than steady. So yes, if you would like a poem for any of your poetry needs, you can reach me at TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com or go right to the website, TarzanaJoe.com. And
TarzanaJoe.com.
I want a poem.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there. It's on the website. He will write you poems for whatever occasion that you like, and you don't have to worry about inflation. Your buying power has not been weakened at TarzanaJoe.com.
Not at all. You're going to get the same stuff you got last year. That's what I thought.
Well, Tarzana Joe, thank you so much for today's poem. It's very timely on inflation and the midterms. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I mean, look, you take a look at what we're looking at here in terms of inflation. Next week is the GDP report. I think Hugh will be back in the saddle for that one. The GDP report is probably going to be less than cheery. I'm not sure it's going to be negative, but I'm sure it's not going to be very positive, even if it manages to crawl back into the black. But inflation is still running away, and you're still seeing Democrats trying to run away from the implications of that. And I'm not sure that we have the time right now to get to this, but maybe we do. Maybe cut 24 really quickly. Let's go to cut 24. James Clyburn talking about inflation.
Well, let me make it very clear. All of us are concerned about these rising costs, and all of us knew this would be the case when we put in place this recovery program. Anytime you put more money into the economy, prices tend to rise.
Well, no kidding. We've been saying that since the American Rescue Plan was first floated out in February. Lawrence Summers wrote a Washington Post column saying you're going to touch off out of control inflation by throwing more stimulus onto an economy that doesn't require it. And now James Clyburn on MSNBC said, oh, yeah, well, we knew that all along. Yeah, we knew that all along. Yeah, prices were going to go up. We knew it. Well, that's great now to hear, but it certainly points up why they shouldn't have done this in the first place. They keep talking about the fact that they rescued the economy. The truth is that the economy was already recovering. It was actually recovering fairly well. And we'd already dumped what arguably was unnecessary stimulus into the economy 2 months prior to the American Rescue Plan. We hadn't even spent that money yet. Congress had already appropriated. We hadn't even spent that money yet when we dumped that money into the economy. And so the American Rescue Plan wasn't about rescuing the economy. The American Rescue Plan was about buying votes. It's the same thing with Joe Biden's student loan bailout program. It's about buying votes. They're spending money left and right trying to buy votes, and they're making the economic situation worse and worse and worse. Now, again, if James Clyburn's willing to admit that, oh, yeah, of course, when you throw up money out into the economy, it's going to make prices rise, then what the heck was the, $1 trillion? $500 billion of the student loan debt forgiveness plan? Why are we doing that? Why did we spend $740 billion on the Inflation Reduction Act? Those are questions that Democrats don't want to answer, but they're going to answer for shortly. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere. Ed Morrissey will be right back. There's one place you should go. ReliefFactor.com. The 4 natural supplements that make your day wonderful. You take Icariin, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, and you feel good, especially on Fridays because the long weekend beckons. And you're going to have a lot of opportunity to get out there and do your weekend warrior stuff. Go for your long run, your long ride, your long hike, whatever it is that you do on the weekend that you don't get to do during the week, and it leaves you feeling, well, great until the next day minor aches and pains come along. Not with ReliefFactor.com. And if you're having a bad commute this morning, it would not be so bad if you'd already taken your Relief Factor for 3 weeks, gotten your body's supply of the natural anti-inflammatory supplements in Relief Factor, every packet up. So don't wait another moment. Get up from wherever you are and go get your ReliefFactor.com. And remember, leave a bag in the car. If you listen to me on your way to work, make sure that you've got your Relief Factor. You don't hit your forehead every morning and say, doggone, I forgot my Relief Factor this morning. Just put it in your car, take it along with your water, and then come right back for more of Ed Morrissey here on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, filling in for Hugh from the ReliefFactor.com studios here deep in the heart of Texas. Joining me now is Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel John Birsch to talk about an important case regarding religious exemption from vaccine mandates. John, tell us a little bit about what's going on in this case. I believe it's at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals now.
It is at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and it arises out of the City of New York's policy of requiring all city workers to get vaccinations despite religious objections, or not only do they lose their jobs, but they're ineligible to work for any employer anywhere in New York City. So even though we're at a time now where the federal government has effectively declared the pandemic to be over, these poor, hardworking individuals in New York City are unable to be employed literally anywhere in a city of 8 million people near their homes. And we're talking about public school teachers, principals, firefighters, police officers, even sanitation workers who don't come into contact with anyone. And what's particularly outrageous about the city's conduct is that it allows exemptions for athletes. The New York Knicks don't have to be vaccinated to work in New York City. For professional entertainers and their entourages, including makeup artists, even those who work in strip clubs. So while we have these hardworking New York public employees who can't put food on the table and are losing their homes, they have no options unless they want to go become strippers.
Well, yeah, I guess I guess that's what they're incentivizing, right? Not everybody qualifies for that. I can guarantee you, though, John. But I mean, we're joking around here a little bit, but I mean, this is almost the definition of arbitrary and capricious. Why would strippers who work exclusively indoors be privileged over sanitation workers who work almost exclusively outdoors, where there's no risk of transmission from COVID-19 at all?
It is completely illogical. It makes no sense. And even the process that they've set up for requesting a religious exemption is filled with bias and animus towards religion. There are certain preferential religions which almost always get a pass. If you're a Christian Scientist, you can probably get a religious exemption. But if you're part of a religious denomination that's had a leader, such as if you're a Catholic and Pope Francis has said that it's okay to get vaccinations, they'll routinely deny you. If you're a religious person that comes to this belief about vaccines based on the fact that they're connected to aborted fetal cells, you're categorically denied. If you're a religious person who draws your beliefs about vaccination from personal prayer and talking to God as opposed to a formal religious denomination, again, you're out. It's just absolutely absurd and causing pain to the people that New York City most needs to be on the job right now. It's well understood that New York has a staffing crisis where they don't have enough teachers in the schools and they don't have enough police officers on the beat. They don't have enough firefighters or sanitation workers. And yet they're punishing these people because they're trying to live according to their religious convictions.
John, I mean, I think that this puts the government in position of becoming a police of religious doctrine. I mean, you mentioned the Catholic issue, and I mean, I'm Catholic, so I know what you're talking about there, where the Vatican said you don't need to worry about theological issues with the vaccines, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it strikes down every possible religious objection from Catholics or anybody else. And it sounds to me like it's almost like government is being set up as enforcement of religious doctrine, which is very much contrary to the First Amendment.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Sticking with the Catholic Church example, while Pope Francis has said that he thinks it's okay for people to be vaccinated, he's also said that every Catholic needs to carefully consider the issue, pray about it, and could reach their own independent decision. He understands that there's differences of opinion on this. So the fact that that was his opinion doesn't prevent other people from reaching a different decision on that. And then as far as the city is concerned, yes, they're violating the First Amendment in two ways. First, the Free Exercise Clause prohibits the government from applying laws that impact your religion in discretionary or discriminatory ways, and that's obviously happening here, where you've got all this discretion in the mayor's office, which can grant the exemptions to athletes and strippers, as well as to the panels that are reviewing these religious exemption requests, which the city has admitted use no objective standards at all. It's completely case by case, however they happen to feel. But then it's also an Establishment Clause problem, and that's what I think you were alluding to.
Right.
The First Amendment prevents the government from creating its own religion. And by picking winners and losers in religious denominations. That's exactly what the Constitution was intended to prevent. You go all the way back to the founding, and the idea was that if you had religiously minded people of one denomination, say in Massachusetts, they couldn't punish people who are of other faiths because of their religion. And yet that's exactly what's happening in New York City.
And this is exactly why we need to support Alliance Defending Freedom, too, adflegal.org. John Birsch, thank you so much for being with us. We've been talking about this all week. Alliance Defending Freedom is represents people who really can't afford this level of defense when contending with government regulation. So Alliance Defending Freedom, adflegal.org, is doing that work for them. And that's the reason why people who are conservative, people who are of faith, and even people who are just concerned about government overreach should be supporting Alliance Defending Freedom, adflegal.org. Go to hughhewitt.com and click on the banner to contribute. Coming up next, the Hillsdale Hour with Dr. Larry Arnn. I'm Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.